Good morning to you. Today is June 26, 2024, and I just put out a social media response about listening to the core of who we are, listening to our truths, listening to measuring everything that goes on with the world by the truths that are within us, not by our moods, not by opinions, not by stereotypes, what someone thinks of us and what they thought of our past and our family history and our culture and our religion, not by emotions, not by your experiences, and I believe that is a major part of this generational cycle of pain. It's generational because what we believe as parents, the thoughts that we carry along with us, are the same ones that we somehow directly and indirectly place in our children's inner garden, in their mind. It's through our actions, it's through our words, it's through the moods. I believe that as children, we're so close to God. We're so close to the truth. We're so close to this ever loving spiritual energy, infinite intelligence. I grew up I grew up labeling it as God. But I also believe even more, and even as a child, that we cannot label this, we cannot put it in a box, this infinite intelligence. We cannot just limit who it is by name, who it is by what happens to us in life, who it is by what our elders thought of it, our ancestors. That, as my mom shared with me, so intuitively shared with me as a child, that you have to know God for yourself. He is not in a building. And even saying he, because do we really know as a he, or I believe that it needs to be what it needs to be for us at any given moment, whether it's the voice of reason of a voice, of a girl's voice, a lady's voice, of a boy's voice, a man's voice, whatever we may need, including when I think about myself, not growing up with my biological father and really feeling like I needed that male input. Often when I listened to the voice of reason, when I was in a closet in our apartment closet in Memphis, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years old. And I've shared this story before that children locked me, kind of put me in a closet. Now, I shouldn't say lock because they put me in the closet. And, maybe, they did press against the door so I wouldn't get out. But there was this voice that said, um, told me to sit down, to be quiet, um, and not so much as sit down, to be quiet, and to that someone would come and rescue me. And that was a man's voice that I heard. And sure enough, within seconds later, my father came in and let me out, back out into the light, because it was dark in there in that closet. Um, but when I think about everything that I share as an adult to adult, the reason why I do it is much more for the children that are our future leaders, our future parents, our future police officers, our future teachers, principals, um, creators in all forms, messengers of the world. And it's what we share with our children today will impact their message in the future, their message even now. When you hear foul language and um, cursing and name calling, disrespectful tones to elders, even when you hear loving words and children that help each other, that may not see no colors, but see themselves as a child, as is the other child. That whatever it is that we as parents do, as caregivers do, impacts the divine message that our children are here to present. I believe we're all reflections of the truth. We all have within us the truth within our hearts and minds, and we can sway back and forth. Even yesterday, I had a moment of just cloudiness where I wasn't quite feeling myself. And when I say self, I mean the highest form of ourselves in that moment, right? Because we continue to evolve, we continue to grow spiritually aware. And I believe that is the goal, whether it is, very small, very large at a time. That is our goal, is that on earth, is this spiritual evolution, that we all have a curriculum to learn, to observe, to transcend, um, to pass on, the baton, if you will, uh, in this life. And it's not a race, but it is here. It's your turn to share your message in the world, as we tell our children, as we tell others. And so I had a moment of cloudiness, and I could feel it. You could feel when you're not yourself. You can feel when maybe you're comparing yourself with others, or there's something that is uneven. There's something that is weighing you down. There is something that is not clear on your part. And I believe when we feel that way, it is actually a cleansing that is occurring. It is a moment of, yes, a stormy time, but as I believe with all storms comes clarity after that. And I believe, just like my mother would tell us, she's the one that raised us and said, God is doing his work, be still. And so we would all gather into a room and just kind of sit there and let the storms pass. That was a spiritual training of allowing my mind to just observe the storm. Because I believe, as I share in my proposed memoir, Compass, that it helped me, it at least gave me that foundation. Because I think as our experiences, as we experience things, we can kind of tilter off that truth that we know inside of us, if you know what I'm saying. We can tilter off that truth. We can kind of wave a little bit back and forth. And I believe it's being grounded in what we know for sure, being grounded in those truths that lie to anchor us to ourselves. And that preparation, my mother, for the physical storm helped me with the spiritual storms of my life, including yesterday, where I was able to just kind of watch it. I was observant how I responded to my children. I was observant how I responded to myself, the thoughts that came up, and responding lovingly to those thoughts, and getting clarification. And some thoughts just allowing, them to flow. But for me, I know it's when we're talking about pain, I know Eckhart Tolle has mentioned about letting those thoughts flow. And I believe that we want to acknowledge those thoughts, because I believe those are seeds that are weeds that grow within us, that we've allowed to come within us. And I believe we must acknowledge those thoughts, and it's discernment, being able to know which thoughts to acknowledge and to replant seeds of truth, to understand that we have the ability, we can change our thoughts. And when I talk about that, I talk about our children. That I did a podcast on spiritual awakening, and it's so easy to become who you think you are. As far as your thoughts, anger and frustration, and so easy to allow those emotions to get the best of you. And when we talk about spiritual awakening, are we encouraging our children? Are we helping them to see that they're not their thoughts, that they don't have to align with anger and fear, um, and all of these emotions that eventually lead to these mental health diagnoses, anxiety, depression, um, anger management. It's I believe that we are not our emotions. There's a Bible verse that says, he didn't, our Creator did not give us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and keyword self-control. That we do not have to give into those emotions. We can acknowledge them and we can talk through them, but we do not have to become them. And I think that is one of the biggest seeds that we can encourage our children, is that you have the power to master your thoughts, your personality. Because I believe as we go through life, as I've mentioned before, we are to align our spirit with our personality. And our personality comes from, all this background, our genetic blueprint, all these different types of lives that have lived before us. And there is this divine spirit that knows all, sees all, is everywhere, that we have the opportunity to conquer, to transcend, to dominate through our spirit, that no matter what it is that makes up our physical being, our genetic blueprint, we as divine spirits have the power to still be who we are. And I've mentioned before that one life taken is too many. When we think about suicides, when we think about, pregnancy, teenage pregnancy, when we think about homicides and violence on any level, the one life taken, it doesn't have to be physically taken yet, because I believe that before there is a physical demise, there is a mental, emotional one that occurs way before that. And many people feel helpless about what they're going through. It's so easy to feel helpless in a storm. But when we disengage from that storm, when we know that we are not what we experience, is where our true power lies. It's where we see the trueness of ourselves. It's where we are more of an observer, as mentioned, than we are an experiencer. And the preciousness of, you just think about what you go through as an adult, and can you imagine your children going through that? So pain is not just about breaking the physical pains, helping our children, to cross the street and, to skate a certain way so they don't fall or land on their butt, but hard, or don't get electrocuted, as we prepare our homes for our children, our babies, putting in the plugs so they don't get electrocuted, or telling them to watch their step and watching them and putting them in a crib. What about the mental stuff that we do for them, the spiritual that we do for them, and helping to keep their internal home safe, and helping them to cultivate the mindset that transcends experiences, to know that they are the controller of themselves and not of others, to know that they respect others, their bodies, that they have no right to touch others, to hit others, push or kick anyone, to call people by their names instead of what we think they are. And that's what I think about parenting, that yes, it is, for many people say, a challenging experience, but I want to reframe that in saying that it is a challenging opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to help our children remember who they are, to help to actually have children in place to break the generational cycle of painful thoughts that have gotten us to where we are today. And it's not necessarily bad because there are people that are out here, and I don't even want to say it's bad, it's life. There are people out here that believe the same thing, that believe that we have the power to make the world a better place. If we did, we wouldn't have all of these charities and all this other stuff that's going on. But there's still too that divisiveness, the stereotypes, the hatred, the violence, the suicide. We still see that. And we have an opportunity as parents and caregivers to help our children be the light, to help remind people of who they are, that children are not a burden or a distraction, but are here just like us to fulfill their divine purpose. And so this is I just wanted to share that with you this morning. My children are asleep, and I sent that out into the world regarding not being swayed by others' opinions or voices of reason, but really looking for what resonates with you, what gives you that peace and that joy that you feel. That it's really, these messages, hopefully, as spiritual teachers, I believe that's the goal, is to help remind us of who we are. And within that, we act on our truths, not what other people are doing, not in competition with others, not in challenging others, but in really bringing out what's already in us, and really bringing out our version, our divine message, our version of the truth. I still send I haven't been diligent about that. There are some other things that are going on in our lives right now, but I do have a newsletter that is going, notes on empowering you to be you, and it's about what I feel that can help us to remember the divine spirit that we are, to remember the resiliency, and just the power that we have within us. Because I believe the more and more we are reminded of that, the more we'll see our lives change and the world change. The world change for the better. And I will have that link in the introduction of this podcast. As always, make this lifetime great because you still can. And I hope that you have a great rest of your week, and to continue to be mindful of your thoughts, of your words, your actions, and what we're sharing with the next generation. I'll talk to you guys soon.